Today's lesson is on cell division, which is also called mitosis. Before we talk about what actually happens during cell division, we should talk about why cells divide. Cells divide for 4 reasons. The first reason is growth, also development, reproduction, and repair. What tells a cell how and when to divide? Well, the same thing that tells every part of your body what its function is and how it should look, and that's DNA. DNA has the instructions for all of a cell's activities, so it tells the cell when and how to divide. Let's break down these 4 reasons for cell division. The first is growth. Individual cells grow to a limit. They grow to a certain size, and then they have to divide into 2 smaller cells. If they grew any larger, then they wouldn't be able to do the chemical reactions because it would take too much time for molecules to diffuse or osmose across the cell membrane and get to where they need to be to do the chemical reaction. So, cell division allows for more surface area to volume ratio in order for the cell to function. As a cell divides over and over and over again throughout the course of its life, the organism gets bigger. So when it says, or when you're asked, how do you get bigger, how do you grow taller, how do your muscles gain mass, it's because of cell division inside of your body. It's not that your cells get bigger, it's that your cells become more and more. The next reason we talked about was development. In development, this means cells are becoming specialized to perform specific jobs. If you take a look at this picture of a human embryo before it's born, you can see that every human started out in stage 1 as just one tiny little cell. And that tiny cell divided into 2 and then 4 and then 8, and each time it would double. All of those cells in the early stages of development are exactly alike. They perform the same functions. They do basically just the basics of cell processes. But, of course, you know that as a teenager or as an adult, not all of your cells do the same job. The cells in your eye don't do the same job as the cells in your brain. The cells in your brain don't do the same job as the cells that make up your skin. So, as the embryo of the baby develops, those cells start to become specialized to do specific jobs. The eye cells become different from the stomach cells. Muscle cells, skin cells, and brain cells all look different and have different jobs, and therefore that's part of development. This development leads to levels of organization within the same organism. We learned about these before. The organization of an organism starts with the cell. Cells group together to form tissue. Tissue groups together to form organs. Organs group together to form an organ system. And organ systems become the entire organism. The next reason a cell divides is for repair. This one seems pretty obvious. As your cells get damaged, your body makes new cells to heal the wounds. Like, for example, platelets in your bloodstream repairing a cut in your skin. If you want some more information about repair, take a look at page 78 in your textbook. And finally, cells divide for reproduction. When organisms use cell division to produce offspring, it's called reproduction. Simple organisms, like the bacteria you see in this picture, reproduce just by cell division. They make an exact copy of their DNA, and then basically you can see the cell, one cell splits down the middle. This produces an exact genetic copy of the parent cell. Other organisms, more complex organisms like humans, use a specialized cell from each parent in order to reproduce. This is also true in flowering plants. You've heard of pollen before as maybe something that gives you allergies. Well, pollen is the male cell of a plant, and that's attracted to the female cell of the same type of plant. And this type of reproduction produces genetically unique offspring, meaning the parent and the offspring are not exactly alike. DNA is this molecular key to life. It controls the functions and appearance of every living organism. We know DNA is found in the nucleus of every cell, and what makes it important is that it can make a copy of itself when the cell is ready to divide. Take a look here at DNA making a copy of itself. This is a DNA molecule. You can see as the animation moves forward that molecule starts to unwind. We know it's like a twisted spiral staircase. When it's time to make a copy, the spiral staircase unwinds, and then it kind of looks like a zipper. The molecule unzips, splitting down the middle. Each of the little colored things are the DNA bases that we learned about, A's, T's, C's, and G's. And to make a copy, another set of A's, T's, C's, and G's lines up with the two halves of the original DNA strand. Chromosomes are made from a strand of DNA that gets wrapped around proteins. Basically, this is a way to keep your DNA, which we know is really, really long, coiled up in a nice organized fashion so that when cell division occurs, the DNA goes where it's supposed to go. When it coils up, it looks like an X shape. These are pictures of human chromosomes. You can see they kind of look like X's, where they have a part in the middle and then two side pieces. Chromosomes allow cells to keep track of their super long DNA strands. You can get an illustration of how DNA goes from DNA strand coiled up into a chromosome if you take a look on page 75. We can also take a look at that here. So here we have a DNA molecule, which is part of a very long strand, and you can see that molecule gets wrapped around proteins, and those proteins coil up to form the double helix of the chromosome that we see. So once a cell decides, or once the DNA in a cell tells the cell that it's actually time to divide, the cell goes through a cycle, and it repeats this cycle over and over and over again. There are three parts to the cell cycle. The first is called interphase. This is a preparation phase, and this is where the cell spends most of its time. This is where the cell is doing its normal cell respiration or photosynthesis, doing all of the functions that it normally does. Then when it comes time for actual cell division, that part of the process is called mitosis, and when the cell splits into two daughter cells, that part is called cytokinesis. So here's a pie chart of how much time each cell spends in the three parts. The biggest amount of time you can see is definitely interphase. Then split into telophase, anaphase, metaphase, and prophase. This is the parts of the cell cycle. This is the parts of mitosis. And then a little bit more time for actual cell division where the cell splits into two different cells. How long does this take? Well, in an adult human cell, it takes about 24 hours for the cell to split into two, and that includes copying its DNA, making sure all of the organelles that are in the cell get split evenly. And most of that time, between 18 and 20 hours, is spent in the preparation phase or interphase. And then about 2 hours of that is spent in mitosis. If you're talking about an embryonic cell, however, it only takes about half an hour, 30 minutes for this whole process to happen. Why do you think that happens so fast if the cell is part of an unborn baby? Probably because that unborn child needs to go through cell division many, many, many more times in order to grow and develop before it's born. So now let's break down the different parts of mitosis. We talked about interphase being the part that lasts the longest. What happens in interphase is that the cell doubles in size, gets bigger, the DNA makes a copy of itself, So you can see here you have the blue strand and the yellow strand. Those are the exact same copy of the DNA molecule. The organelles that are also in the cell double in number. So the mitochondria doubles, the vesicles double, the Golgi apparatus doubles. Everything that's in the cell makes a copy of itself as well, so that the two daughter cells don't have to start completely over. They have what the parent cell also had. Then moving on to prophase, now we start in the fast part of mitosis. In prophase, the DNA wraps up into those chromosomes. The long strand of DNA coils around the proteins that are available, and you can see it makes these X shapes. Remember that one strand of the DNA was blue, that was the original strand, and the copy of it was yellow. The spindle forms. The spindle is a part on the outside edges of the cell that are going to help pull those chromosomes apart. And the centrioles are also part that help pull the chromosomes apart. You can see what's happened to the nuclear membrane as well. It's kind of started to disintegrate. And the nuclear membrane begins to disappear. The next phase is called metaphase. I remember metaphase because it reminds me of the middle, MM. In metaphase, the nucleus is completely gone, and the chromosomes line up along the middle of the cell. They form this nice long line, and they're getting ready to get pulled to each of the ends of the cell, also called the poles. So we have the equator and the poles, just like on the Earth. Next phase is anaphase. In anaphase, the chromosomes actually get pulled apart. Let me back up and show you that again. You can see, what you can't see are there's these little strings that attach to the middle of each chromosome from each side, and those strings pull the chromosome halves apart. So now what is going to be one new cell here and one new cell here, they each have the exact same copies of the DNA. And the last phase is telophase. This is where the nuclear membrane forms again around the chromosomes, and the chromosomes unwind back into strands of DNA, and cytokinesis begins. You can see the cell membrane starts to pinch down through the middle. In cytokinesis, the cytoplasm divides and everything inside it divides, and the cell membrane pinches into two new cells. So now we have two new cells that have the same DNA, and they move on and they do this over and over again. In this animation, you're seeing the whole part of mitosis. What you don't see is the cell membrane, which would be around the outside here. This is just the nucleus. You can see the DNA has already formed chromosomes. The centrioles are moving to the outside edge. Now we're into metaphase, where the chromosomes line up in the middle, and the spindle fibers attach. And then next we have anaphase, where those spindle fibers pull the chromosomes apart. And telophase, where the chromosomes become DNA again, and this is a nuclear membrane, and this is a nuclear membrane, and then we are slowly becoming two complete new cells. So that's cell division.